talking about all things difficult and trying to make sense of the things that we all struggle with. And so tonight, for this workshop series, we decided to jump into this idea of STRESSTEMBER, of like what it means to step back into routine and why are everybody seemingly a shit show. So a couple of things, caveats that I want to tell you about tonight. If you're new here, welcome. We have a lot of new people to the show. And so if you're watching us live, tell us where you're from. We'd love to know that. A couple of things in terms of disclaimer, although I'm a psychologist, this isn't considered a therapeutic intervention. This is simply resources and information that I hope will be helpful. A number of you have sent some questions my way, which I really, really love. And so we'll answer those in general terms in our 30 minutes after this little talk. And I can see all of the connections and communication, and Marty's here with me too. So if there's anything that you need along this night while we're doing this live, just pop in the chat. We would love that. And as always, when I speak, I start by acknowledging the land on which I created all of these things for you. And so my home, where I live and play and work and raise our babies, is Treaty 7 land, which is now known as the central part of the province of Alberta. It is home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is made up of the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tatina First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda First Nation, and the Métis Nation Region 3. It is always my honor, my privilege to do this work where so much sacrifice was made. And as always, I always never ever want to forget just how lucky I am to be in this position. So thank you for joining me tonight. We are going to talk about, okay, so there's a difference between clinical anxiety and the things we're going to talk about tonight. So we're going to kind of dip into some of these things tonight, but I wanted to just talk about what happens to our bodies when we step into a season where there's change. And oftentimes stress is the hallmark of change, and it's necessary. We're going to talk about that. But what happens when it flips into anxiety, and what is anticipatory anxiety specifically? Okay. And then I'm going to just walk you through a few things around what are the symptoms you're going to look for? What are you going to maybe notice in this season in kids and in adolescents, and how that shows up differently, mostly in our bodies. And then how we're going to kick it in the ass. Okay. So the other disclaimer is I might swear. So if you have small children, or if you have a concern about that, I'm fucking sorry, but also not really. And the other thing is, I'm just joking. The other thing is that just if you don't want anybody to hear that, you could do this on your ear, you know, like this. And I haven't talked about the swearing in a really long time, but again, authenticity, when we're talking about hard things, becomes really important to me, that we offer a language that sometimes makes people pay attention. So how I show up here is how I would show up if we went for lunch. And I think that's really important. And when we're doing hard things around having conversations around mental health and life-saving shit. Okay, so that's going to be tonight. So buckle up. I hope you have snacks. I have a Stanley because my daughter tells me you're very cool if you have a Stanley. So this thing basically better stay cold for 26 years. Water to the top for this girl today. Okay, so let's start. I did prepare a couple of slides for you. And so just a quick sort of recap of this workshop series. So every month, mostly it's the first Monday of every month, we pick a topic. So we've done historically things like ADHD, depression, clinical anxiety, divorce, grief, setting boundaries. Up next is personality disorders. People often talk about narcissistic people and histrionic people. And I really want to clarify about, you know, what some of those things mean and why we develop personality disorders. So that's coming up. But the purpose here is I would love interaction and questions, any way that I can be helpful to this community to share some of the things that I've learned around mental health and neurological functioning that really feeds the way our bodies show up in this world. Okay, so there's lots about thoughts and feelings that we have to navigate, but also the way our body responds to this world really changes the way we're going to be able to handle things like stress or change. And so for tonight, this is sort of less of a clinical topic, and it's more about sort of a life functioning conversation that I don't think we talk a lot about in this season. Because for me, the fall tends to be a much more significant time of transition than ever I feel like in the new year. And I don't know why that is. I mean, I think maybe because the kids start school, or, there's a shift in our company, or, we sort of get back into routine and sports and all those things. And so I often find that, when it's a drop your shoulders time to goal set, be clear about how you step into the season will really dictate how you navigate the rest of the year. And it's such an important time to just, often anticipatory anxiety is this place where we're like, it's going to be fucking terrible. It's look out. Oh my God, we're not ready. We didn't do enough shit in the summer. I'm too fat. All I did was drink. I didn't work out. Oh my God, I'm not ready for I'm still burnt out from the last season. Very rarely are people like toned, tanned, and ready to step in to September. So if that's you, you're in the right place tonight. If you are toned, tanned, and ready to kick some ass, good, because everybody around you is going to need you, including me. Okay. The other thing that I find really interesting about this is that I will be doing this talk tonight in particular is for me. So I'm doing my own work in real time because this has been a season I melt down every August. Always. And Marty reminded me of this because I was crying on a beach last year. And I think I was doing the same thing the year before when I was at Aaron's dad's. And then similarly this week, I was like, what the fuck am I going to, I'm not ready. We got all the shit over I feel my physical health feels like I'm not looking after it. How can I, what do you mean we're going to be on the road for every single day? Like, so a couple of these things today that we're talking about, I need you to know that this is happening. Nobody's got their shit together. Okay. Number one, nobody's got their shit together. You can't address what you don't acknowledge. And most of the time we assume that other people, as it may appear on the Instagram or the TikTok, have things organized. They have bought new lunch kits. Everybody's going to handle their veggies and hummus in their lunch. They have a plan. And so many of us have pieces of that maybe pulled together. Those are the pieces that we maybe demonstrate, or those are the things that we tend to sort of be now inundated on social media, where that comparative thing also fuels this anxiety. So if this particular season feels a little bit heavier than most, that's okay. And it's kind of normal. And so I'm going to tell you why. So I want to start with, first of all, this sense of, let me just share this right. Okay. One of the things that I think we don't talk about enough is sort of this stress of stepping back in. So what I think is really interesting is that when I was researching a little bit for tonight's talk, STRESSTEMBER, September stress, has been identified as a real thing. I mean, people, I didn't really know that to be true until I started to read a little bit more about it, but like autumn anxiety is something that, articles have been written about, fall freakouts. And so it was really interesting just to sort of name this, because I think we spent a lot of time, thinking that new year, new you, all the stress that sort of happens in a January transition, that I don't know is really identified to the same degree in the fall. And so part of the reason is, if you're into that place, feeling that, I'm going to give you a few reasons why that is. But it certainly is. I think it was sort of anecdotally expressed by some researchers, sort of claiming that they saw this trend in there's increases of stress, including anxiety, low mood, in these autumn months. And so the question is sort of, why is that, and what does that have to do, and with, why now? And so many of us will sort of know on the surface of this is so many reasons to contribute to this phenomenon, like weather changes, abrupt changes in routine, early wake ups, evening activities, all those things that feel in this one sort of felt swoop of they all come at one time. Okay, so it's the inundation of all of these switches to your body that you wait for that really rob you sometimes of holidays or summer months because you're already thinking about a week ahead, 2 weeks ahead, 3 weeks ahead. Okay. And I think that, goals seem necessary these days. What's your plan forward? You got your kids signed up for this. What's your workout routine? Are you going to start to meal plan? Are you going to stop drinking? Are you going to do sober October? I don't I've heard about that, but all of these things sort of seem to be on the surface. And so it's not about the fact that any of these are bad. You can't sort of stop time, as you know, from sort of moving forward. The question becomes, it becomes so difficult because there is a lot of things that tend to be on the plate in this season. So what's the difference between stress, anxiety, anticipatory anxiety? And I looked when I was creating this very basic slide about the fact that for me, it's sort of a hierarchy. So imagine arrows between stress to anxiety to anticipatory anxiety. They're sort of like this general sense of stress that happens first and then anxiety. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about, the definition of these three things, because I think we use them interchangeably a lot. I'm anxious about this, I'm stressed about this, I'm worried about that. There's a subtle difference, but I think it's important. And I think in particular, if I think about stress, so people try to avoid stress a lot. I just want you to be happy. I don't want my kids to be stressed. I hate it when I'm stressed. Stress is normal and necessary. There is not a single human on this planet in this moment that does not carry with them some degree of stress. It is the reaction that happens to everybody when there is a change in routine, an increase in temperature, it's the body's way of letting us know that there's been an external change. And it's defined as sort of, it kicks those anxious responses into place, and it sort of tells us that either there's danger or at least something that needs to be attended to. It's sort of like your beacon in your body that you want. Think about this. If you never ever had a response in your body that everything was just always fucking great and you were like, I don't know, like buzzed or high the entire time, it kills motivation. It kills a notice to when danger might be coming. So when we use the word stress, it is always, if not most of the time, really connected to the negative side of things, which really, again, it's that narrative that I really want to talk about in this season because I'm so stressed about things. It is also that place of indicating in your body when you are connected to it, that it's like, okay, change is coming. Here we are. We're in a time where things have to switch. Now, when you experience changes or challenges, stressors of any kind, your body produces physical and mental responses, right? So even often, so many of these things are outside of our zone of consciousness, or they just happen because, as you know, in the many times, or you may not know this, but I talk about trauma all the time. And trauma is really the antithesis of an extreme experience of stress in the body. And even in minor places, not trauma like, extreme experiences of encoding things in terror versus just normal stressors of a day, the body keeps the score in each of those experiences and in that spectrum of experiences. And similarly to encoding something in terror, like a trauma, stress also carries with it a bit of a roadmap in the body. We get used to the narrative that every September, here we go. We didn't do enough. We don't know, Christmas means here comes all the drinking and eating. Whatever that is. Okay. So I want to just break this down to the basics about, what stress does, increases our cortisol levels, changes neurochemically in our body start to happen in times of shift. And the issue, of course, comes when there is a significant amount of stress or an ongoing increase in your heart rate because of the elevated levels of the stress hormones and the blood pressure that can take a toll on your body. So when we take stress at its basic, it's okay if you have it in this season, because for many of us, it is a season of reflection and change and getting shit back on track. Okay, so normal. When we move into the realm of anxiety, I want to just differentiate that, because anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. We typically don't worry about things that are very predictable and routine to the degree that we do about the what ifs, okay? And anxiety is sort of a more specific response in the body that tends to respond to the things that we become uncertain about, not just necessarily the stress of things moving up and down in our life, but the anxiety is the thing that sort of gets a little bit greater in this response to the body, okay? And anxiety disorders are the most frequent mental health problems seen in primary care and child psychiatry, in kids and in adults, more prevalent in women, or more identifiable, more reported by women or girls, but often experienced equally across gender identifications. And today isn't about sort of the clinical diagnosis of anxiety, but it's more about what it means to your body when change comes. So when I think about anxiety as a warning mechanism, stress is sort of that middle range, like normal response to most things. Anxiety is when it gets a little bit more heightened, okay? And we start to play out scenarios that result in an increase in cortisol and uncertainty, sometimes then associated with fear, not knowing how this is going to play out, really results in a bit of an emotional dysregulated state. You know, if you've ever listened to me speak before, it's talking from a neurological perspective, your lid starts to flip a little bit, okay? When you are calm and regulated, even if there is stress or things that are changing in your life, you have the ability to handle stuff a whole lot better. When anxiety takes over, it starts to flip that a little bit. You lose access to the best parts of yourself. Okay. Baseline is true for me and everybody else, is that you are much better able to handle anything. Changes in routine, increase in kids going back to things, your job, navigating your babies through things, and your own self, if you are in a place where you're emotionally regulated. You are a phenomenal parent, a very remarkable partner, a beautiful employee, or you know, whatever your role is in terms of doing work in your world. You are phenomenal when you are emotionally regulated. When you get dysregulated, when anxiety starts to set in particular, what happens is we lose access to the best parts of ourselves. Okay, so I keep doing this because if you've seen me speak before, or you read any of the books, what happens from a neurophysiological perspective is, if you tuck your thumb on the inside, this is your brain. Okay, it's a hand model of your brain. Your limbic system lives on the inside. Fight, flight, or freeze lives right here. And on the outside is your prefrontal cortex, wraps around your limbic system, lives right above your eyeballs. Everything you've ever learned in your life, how to handle September, how to deal with difficult kids, how to walk your own children through hard things, how to be nice, how to not be assholery-ish, how to make good choices in your own life. They all live in your prefrontal cortex. When that lid, Dan Siegel talks about it as a lid, when that's on, you have access to all of those things. When stress starts to happen and we start to get anxious about things, it fucking lifts that little bitch up a little bit, okay? And we start to lose access to the best parts of ourselves. Now, that tends to happen a lot in August or autumn, because I mean, I'm in the States right now, and of course, typically school seasons and our friends in Australia are completely different in the times of when they return to school. But I want to talk about this more so as a season, because what happens when we get that stress sort of settling in is we start to do this a little bit more, okay? And one of the things around anxiety is really naming it for that, because often we get misattuned in our in our body's response to the things that are around us. It says there's danger when sometimes, just based on our story, our narrative, our experience of the inundation of other people's experiences, data, social media reports, our partner's anxiety, our children losing their fucking minds, whatever the deal is, our body says, ah, danger, okay? And oftentimes when we have the ability to slow it down and really take a look at whether there is danger or not, our ability to handle and navigate these changes that are inevitable, these stresses that are normal, we become much more equipped to do so. And I wanted just to highlight this term anticipatory anxiety as well, because I think that's really what we're talking about tonight, instead of a clinical disorder, which is sometimes the difference between a clinical disorder and just an anxiety response is that it severely starts to debilitate your functioning. So that's always, if I were to make a decision about a diagnosis around a clinical disorder, often many of us are anxious. Many of us have anxiety for things, whether it's speaking in front of a crowd or, not being successful, or a piece of social anxiety, others were. When it becomes a clinical disorder, which is really hard to get, harder than we think for most people, it is significantly debilitating your functioning. Okay, so there's a spectrum there, but I really want us to be clear tonight that anxiety and anticipatory anxiety is a very normal response to, particularly these days, the significant amount of inundation of change and data and information that happens in our world that our bodies very rarely have had time, even generationally, to adapt to. Okay, so if you're listening to this right now, drop your shoulders, because I promise you this goes like this. Okay, now anticipatory anxiety specifically is not a diagnosis. It is defined as the fear or worry that bad things could happen in the future. Okay, so we have no data to suggest that any of these things, or that something could happen. It is simply the thought of all the balls we're going to drop, the potential that people are going to die, that bad things are going to happen, that we're going to fuck up something that actually makes our body believe that we're already in it. Okay. And you can imagine that anticipatory anxiety robs us of the present moment, because when we spend a lot of time worrying about all the shit that's going to go wrong, what do we miss? The things that are going well, the things that are happening in this very moment. Okay. So with this type of anxiety, or this sort of label of an anxiety experience, we may fixate on things that we can't predict. Okay, so uncertainty, fear, no end in sight, all of those things sort of come together. You can see in this emotional rate, it really contributes to emotional dysregulation, or that lid flipping thing. The uncertainty of the future can be scary because it is out of control. And remember, we like it best when things are predictable, when there's structure, routine. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of characterized by this phrase like, what if? Okay. And I'm going to stop this just for 1 second sharing, so I can see your face a little bit better. But the issue with, I think, all of these ideas of sort of flipping the lid, of keeping our lid on in times of distress, is I want you to know that you should flip your lid sometimes. In fact, it's necessary. I say this about kids often. The chaos is necessary to learn the calm. So when we now step into talking about symptoms or the things we'll experience, if you see these things or experience these things in your body or in the kids you love or lead or teach, it's normal. Don't panic, okay? Because the only way you learn a script to deal with anxiety is you first have to address the fact that it's happening. And you have to walk people home through it. You have to walk yourself through it, because we need a script on how to deal with it. If we walk through every season the exact same way, we're just going to fucking survive. We're going to drink our way through it. We're going to exercise our way through it. We're going to do whatever it is, and not really address the fact that, okay, do we really need to be worried about these things? What happens is the narrative stays the same, and we get no script. We get no sort of ability to do it. If we always freak out, lose our minds every single time, don't draw attention to that pattern or understand the reasons why, it continues to debilitate us, because the body keeps the score. So what I really want to talk about in this season is that, because it is such a thing, STRESSTEMBER, autumn freakout, fall freakouts, whatever the deal is, it is pretty common for many people to feel this way. And when you identify this as a pattern, what you do is take some of the wind out of the sails, okay? Because our body should be in this state a little bit. So let's give it some grace in that way. Let's know that anxiety, stress, and that anxiety is really meant to say to us, changes are coming. We got some big things on the horizon, okay? And what we do with that matters way more than whether it's happening or not. Okay, because an attempt to de-stress, to avoid all stress, to avoid all chaos, to keep kids quiet, to not have a plan for when it comes is the dumbest fucking deal. Okay. And we try to do this all the time, particularly from a behavioral model. How do we get people to be calm? How do we make sure we avoid any distress for our children? How do we make them happy all the time? Instead of having a plan for when shit falls off the rails. That tends to be so much more productive than this idea of, I just want my kids to be happy. I just don't, oh God, they're going through these changes. They're not saying these things. They're inundated by social media. What do we do if they're on the Snapchat and they get pulled into a sex ring? That's worrisome. Yeah. And so it is a thing that you should be concerned about. And what we do with that matters. What we do in response to those notes matter. When we really take a look at, from a calm perspective, what of those things are realistic? What do we need to worry about? How do we evaluate that? And if any of those things are reasonable concerns, what do we do about it? That becomes the question, okay? So a couple of things I just want to land on briefly is how it manifests in the body, okay? I just have my notes over here, so I want to make sure this is you. How it manifests in the body is the big question. All right, so let me just share this one more time so that you can see these notes a little bit easier, maybe. Here we go. So here's some potential, I called them symptoms, but these are some things that it can kind of show up for big people, for adolescents, and then for little people that can sometimes be a manifestation of the same response, but just look a little bit different. So when I think about big people, normally when anxiety, stress starts to set into our worlds, it becomes more difficult to sleep. We start to overplan and think about everything. What if this goes wrong? What if this goes wrong? Sometimes when it becomes too much for many of us, we just fuck it, avoid it, numb. So it's interesting. I wanted to clarify sleep issues because for some people, one of the things for me is that I know I stop sleeping. I start thinking about everything. I lay down to try to relax or give myself a break. And what happens is this will happen every time in this season. I'm like, I just need to sleep. I just need to sleep. I know I need some sleep. I'm just going to get to sleep. So I lay there, I get into bed. And if I draw myself out of my thoughts into my body, 99% of the time, it's midnight. I should be sleeping. I'm mad at myself because I'm not sleeping. I'm thinking about all the things. If I just switch my thoughts to my body, I will tell you every single time these are up. And you can imagine if we just take your thoughts out of it, how easy it would be for your body to just slip into sleep when you're like this. And so really drawing attention. So you'll notice some of those physical symptoms sort of show up: irritability, negativity, somatic complaints. I've listened to, people sort of stepping back into the season. They're like, this is going to be shitty. We have no resources this year. What is the narrative that you're playing with as you step into this season? The world is falling apart, which, I mean, realistically, we have to really think about, some of those things and review the process that, yes, there is a lot of things happening. It is then what follows closely is a somatic response to the body if we don't draw attention to it. So even for big people, what we notice is GI issues, headaches, stomach aches, all of those things. Draw attention. You don't change anything or do anything about it. Just pay attention to how much more common those things happen in your physical body as changes start to happen in your external world. So similarly, when you don't have words for it, it will spend more time manifesting in your body. So that's what we see in kids a little bit more. So adolescents, little people, irritability, school refusal, somatic complaints, often that idea of like, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this, okay? And then in little people, an increase in tantrums, tummy aches, nightmares, regression in behavior, a desire to be closer to mom and dad, to sleep in, you want kids back on sleep routines and all those things. And then what happens is they want to sleep in your bed. They don't want to leave, like all those kind of things happen. And it's normal in a time of change. Okay, so I just want to lay that out because I think what happens sometimes in this place is we're like, holy shit, everything's falling apart. No, 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 okay, maybe, but that's what happens in times of distress. And I think that that's a pretty, let's just sort of clarify or normalize some of those things in this moment. Okay. Now, the question becomes, why? Why now in this moment? And if we can just give it a little more context, I promise you we'll step into what we're going to do about it. It makes so much sense to me because, again, the body keeps the score. And what I mean by that is that if there is a narrative that September is always the hard month, if there is a narrative that, you know, you didn't do enough to relax, you should be more rested, you didn't take your kids on any holidays, or you took them on too much holidays, you spent too much time trying to slam everything in for summer, and now you actually have another week or 2 weeks or whatever left, and you're like not even enjoying it because you haven't even got school supplies and shit like that, okay? The body is much more aware of seasonal changes, time changes than you can ever imagine. In fact, oftentimes in therapy, when people really struggle with a particular month or a particular time of year, or I always have fall freakouts. Marty has been very good at sort of saying, remember last August, remember the August before when we panicked, and remember when you, oftentimes there's something about that time of year that for whatever reason you have a story about, or your body has a story about. And it's often worth reflecting on what has this season brought you in the past? What has this season been about when you were a kid, when you were an adolescent, when you were a college student? What has this season been about historically for you? And is that true today? Are you in a better financial place? Are you in a better emotional place? Do you have different supports now than you might have historically? Is there any reason to believe that that historical narrative might not be true? And can you tell your body that? And it sounds kind of like fuckery, but the point is the body keeps the score. And a conscious conversation with, we're in a different place now. I'm much more in control of this, or I have a plan for this, or, the greatest, Bessel van der Kolk talks about this, the greatest predictor of mental health is feeling safe in your own body and in the presence of other people. And so being able to be conscious of that, is my narrative different than it maybe historically has been, is something I want you to think about when we consider the body keeps the score. Now, back to structure and routine can be exhausting, but mostly I wish I would have used the word daunting there, because I think there's a lot of expectations. Here's what I want to remind you is you have done this your whole life. You have stepped into this season your whole life. This year we get to make a decision, because you showed up here with me, about how we're going to do it. Not if we're going to do it, because guess what? That's inevitable. But how we're going to do it is entirely up to you and me. Are there experiences that will sort of come in and knock us off our game and do all those things? Yeah, that's fucking true every season, okay? But how we're going to do it is up to you and me. And when you want to get back to structure and the intensity of, sports and all of those things, I had a question come in about, should you have your kids and everything? I truly believe the more my kids get older, no. The more you can create a sense of structure, routine, and predictability matters the most for you. And what you can handle and what your children can handle becomes the most important question. Because there are some kids, some families that have a ton of resources and ability to be able to navigate really extreme schedules. And there's some families, probably I would argue many more, that don't. And so what becomes more important to consider is how you show up in the season as a parent, way more than whether your kid's in enough or you're providing them with enough social experiences, sports experiences, whatever that looks like. How we show up and handle that matters way more, and predicts way more than whether they're going to get anything out of 57,000 hockey camps. Okay. Now, The other thing that I don't think we consider enough is the change in the season. So the increase in darkness and a decrease in weather temperature. Again, don't underestimate the fact that your body keeps the score in this process. It's very aware that it's getting darker quicker. It's very aware that things are cooler. And if the fall season comes to you with a narrative of like pumpkin spice and Halloween, and that's something that your body is really excited for, sometimes we tend to step into the season a little easier. If it is marred with the start of the most stressful time of year for you, your body keeps the score, okay? And the change in the external environment is also hardwired into our system. And the other thing that I think is really imperative that we don't talk a lot about is many of us still haven't recovered from last season. COVID, the effects of the pandemic is still a thing. And we don't want it to be, but again, here's the body keeps the score, okay? Many of us, for the remainder of our career, currently, will feel the ramifications of that experience because so many people haven't addressed the significant cost that it is happened to us. And I think so much of the time we are still feeling like we're playing catch up from the burnout. I have never opened a season except for last year and this year talking about burnout in the fall. And I don't do it because I think so many people are burnt out. I have rarely walked through a season where educators, police officers, funeral directors, anybody I talk to can prep for the season and then feel good at the end of it. Teachers in particular, I say this all the time. Did you know that the summer months come the same time every year? Huh? And I love to do PD usually in the fall, professional development conversations, because people are, much more excited to take on the year than they are in, like, say, December, January. But I'm finding more and more these days that it is the anticipatory anxiety that this is going to be tricky because I'm not even ready. I haven't even recovered from the last season. That becomes really important to put on the table, because mostly you can't address what you can't address what you don't acknowledge. And so what I think so much about this is know that if you're stepping into the season worried whether your body is even ready to step back in, simply acknowledging it and giving it some grace, I will tell you, you have the ability to be as great as you've always been. In fact, better than you've ever been. Our job this season is to get access to it, not to question whether you need more skills or you need to be greater at the things. More than ever, it is about how we retain access to the best parts of yourself, because anticipatory anxiety, this stress that sort of takes over, results in us disconnecting from that part, okay? So let's talk about now what we do about it, okay? And let's do this. If I were to think about, going too fast. If I were to think about the strategies, okay, that we are going to use to kick STRESSTEMBER in the ass, none of these are going to be surprise for you, okay? But I think it's important that we walk through them step by step, okay? So all of these strategies are the exact same if we're talking about you or your children or the kids you serve, full stop. People say this to me all the time, right? Like, can you come talk to the kids? Can you talk to this group? The message never changes, okay? Because you were a kid once and they will be adults once. And our ability to handle situations should increase. Our capacity to handle situations should increase as we age, if we've had people to walk us through and give us scripts on hard things. If we haven't, it is never, ever too late to learn them. Surrounding yourself with people, talking about these things, reading books about it, jumping on workshops, will give you a skill set that you didn't have before you engaged in those things. And I think part of the hardest, the thing right now is that we don't have a script as parents to walk through what our kids are inundated in these days, because in just one generation, there has been such a massive change in the availability of data that has resulted in a significant disconnect from face-to-face connection, and also an overwhelming access to information that kids' brains are not ready for. Similarly, to adults, there's an overwhelming access to information, mostly comparative suffering experiences that we think everybody else is doing better than us. So our kids are getting overwhelmed with a ton of shit that their brains aren't ready for. And we are equally as exhausted because we've never been this busy in our lives. And if I were to take it back to the life-changing strategies that matter, I will remind you of this. You matter most. I know we're going to worry so much about the kids and are they okay? You can spend some time there. That's totally okay. But you are the most important person in this season. And we usually put all those people first, which makes sense to me, right? Our employees, our partner, mostly our kids. Are we doing enough? Are we prepared enough for them? Are we all of those kind of things? Yeah? But every tip that we talk about here in the next couple of minutes will apply to the people you love and you lead and you teach to, because I want you to consider you first as you read this list and then reread it as sort of a guide to navigate the people around you too, because where you lead, others will follow. You can't tell people how to be great. You have to show them. You can't tell your kids to follow their dreams and enjoy their jobs if you don't fucking do that. You can't be in a place where I want you to navigate your stress well if I don't at least every once in a while do that okay. So you're our priority here, which is why I'm not a fan of children. Because I say this quite often, I've assessed and treated 1,000 kids in my career as a psychologist, and I've never met a bad one. And sometimes the relationships that do the best have the capacity, at least have the access or the wherewithal to have at least one of the partners able to have a conversation and repair when shit doesn't feel right. Because the issue isn't whether things won't fall off the rails or not feel right, or you'll hit seasons that don't make sense to you or each other. The question is, how do you navigate that? How do you address it? You can't address what you don't acknowledge. And if it isn't you having the skills to do that, who are you bringing in to assist you in that process, right? That's where therapy comes in. That's where best friends are navigating. That's where teachers who know your kids good, better, your hockey coaches, the people in your village can come in, okay? So that's where you know the best, you matter the most in this situation, and our biggest job is getting back to the best parts of yourselves. How do we do that for you and then the people that you love and you lead? Number 2 is back to the basics. Now, this is fucking boring, and people are like, I know, but here's the thing. I always get frustrated with this simple truth. This pisses me off every time. I know it to the core of me, but re-engaging in the basics is truly the most powerful first step, and you can pick any one of these basics, okay? This is my start in this season. Drinking water. If your body is not hydrated, you will not ever be able to get back to the best parts of yourself. So if you don't want to be inundated by all the things you have to do to get better and go for a fucking run and eat kale, pick one of these things, okay? Do something as simple as drinking water, getting another little bit of water in the day. Then, of course, the other 2 that are the big kickers is your sleep and moving your body, water, and what you put in it. So those are my big 4 all the time. And again, I tell you this because I need this reminder to the same degree that I know when I stopped moving my body, I was on a streak of closing my rings all through having the kids this summer in July when we went on a little road trip and did all those things. I closed all the rings. And then there was a couple of days where I got sick and I didn't close my rings. And so my streak ended. And now I'm like, fuck it. No motivation, I'm out. Whatever it is that is going to inspire you a little bit, even if you need to sort of finish one of your water bottles a day, I want you to think about implementing a move of your body in some capacity. It does not need to be running a half marathon right out of the gate, but even just if it is when I talk about closing your rings on your Apple Watch, or getting 10,000 steps, or doing whatever that is, and whatever your ability, your mobility ability is, if it is moving your arms, or getting fresh air every day, that becomes some of the most critical things that I want you to just slow down in. Many of us are better outside. Many of us are better if we get a on purpose time outside the doors in nature. This is true for you. This is true for your kids. I think one of my biggest goals in this season, and I just hear it again and again and again, is to make some time to be still. And the data around meditation, the data around clearing your mind, and you don't have to be good at this, but just finding some time to be still, is probably the most conclusive and convincing data there is in allowing us to get back to the best parts of ourselves, even more so than physical changes, right? I mean, like moving your body or putting good food in your body. Being able to just be still. So if you have any priorities, I wonder about making a commitment with me that 5 minutes a day, ideally we work up to 10 or 20 minutes a day, where you carve out some sacred time to just be still. And it doesn't need to be any specific time of the day. Sometimes if you put it into your schedule or your calendar as a routine, this is the morning that we're going to do this. This is the, where I do this before bed. I don't really give a shit about when, but it is that ability to just step away from, if you have the ability to scroll the Instagram for an hour a day, you look at your Instagram usage, because you can, you can track your social media usage. I am on that thing 3 hours a day, I think is my average these days. Take 5 of those minutes, shut that bitch off, and people say, what if my mind wanders? It doesn't matter. It's okay. Try to be still in that moment and give your body some grace, and exponentially it will pay off, I promise you. So back to the basics is the really the biggest thing that I think, I mean, we know that even just a little bit, it will then be ready to take on more things, and not more things than, I mean, that you can increase your list, but in a way that you'll have access to the best parts of yourself. Okay. 3, what I'd like you to consider is the acknowledgement of the change that's coming. So sometimes when we avoid or go like, we put this off, and what happens in that way is that they all feel, we remember a certain thing, we do think, what about this? Have we done this? Being able to just say, here's all the things that I have in this season. One of the things that I try to do every year as a family, and I don't know that I always get this right, is so 2 things. I want to make a list about all the things that I have coming up. I want to just even be very clear about what are the major things that are happening in this season for me. Okay. So if I were to think about my days on the road in September, October, and November, right? Just getting a screenshot of that. This is what's coming up. This is where I'm going to be. This is how many nights I'm going to be away. I need to know that for me. I need to know that I have a plan, a goal of we're starting a podcast in October. That's a big event that's going to be happening in the launch of my life. That's going to take some time. One of the biggest transitions for our family is that we're moving to a new home coming in September or October. Great fucking time to do this in the middle of everything, but that's some big changes in our family system. And I also want to be committed to moving my body every single day. Okay. Those are the things on my list that I can kind of look at and be like, okay, here's the deal. And I know in my mind that all 3 kids are in hockey. So this is what's happening outside of me. I know the 3 kids are in hockey. Aaron started this job where it means he's away 1 night a week. This is what we got in the fall. This is what's happening on our plates. Now, I need to be clear with, then we try to do this the end of August, every time is a family meeting, right? Here's what's coming up. This is where I'm going to be. This is where Dad's going to be. This is our thoughts around sports. Are we all cool with this? Right? Here is the next time that we get a break together as a family. That becomes some of the most important things. I never try to leave a vacation or a break without knowing when the next one is. And oftentimes what that does is keeps our family connected in terms of, you know, I'm away or dad's away or we're all away. Or there's lots of stuff on our plates, but here's the next time that we get to have a break. And for some of us, it might be the Christmas break or Thanksgiving, or if you take a dedicated vacation in there. Acknowledging that with each other often is sort of this script that says, okay, here's the big changes that are happening in and around us. Taking 20 minutes to do that, first of all, for you, so you lay it out and you know, either in your mind or you write it down, whatever, if you're a visual kind of person. Here's the big things that are on my plate. Here's the things that the kids are going to be involved in if you have your own personal children. And here's our next breaks. Okay, here's our next vacation. Here's our next time where we're going to be able to sort of take our next big breath. And even just having that chat with the kids seems to help me and Aaron, in particular me, to be able to sort of give the kids the heads up. Okay, mom has a number of gigs in the States coming up, which means there are 2 different times where I'm away for 5 nights, and then we get the yeah, that's I know. And here's the place that means we're also going to have to be really connected, because guess what? Liv, Evan, Ash, everybody's in hockey. Okay. Our next break together is November, this date to this date. And here's what we're going to be doing. Okay. And then whatever that is. Okay. Acknowledging the change that's coming, making a little script for that, I can tell you, does not necessarily take the effort and the pain out of what's fixing to happen, but it allows you to sort of get a clear sense of, even between now and December, what's on the schedule, some of those big things, and then to share that, making sure that, you know, your partner, if you have one, or your children, if you have them, are sort of aware of what's coming in that way. Now, it's always age dependent. If you've got infants at home, I mean, you can set up a slideshow, but you know, I think what's really important is you are clear on that direction, and don't be scared to sort of let everybody else in on that too, because especially in that anticipatory place, it allows everybody to have a bit of a script for what's coming. The other thing I just really want to normalize is that big emotion is normal in times of change. And usually there's big emotion when things happen, like sadness that it's over, regret that there wasn't more memories made, all of those things. Emotions, not any single one emotion is bad, but we put a high emphasis on the happy ones, the joy, the good stuff, whatever that is, you know, that label. But I also want you to hold space for the fact that there's sadness in things ending, that there's, you know, regret, or I should have done, and all those things. That emotion is just emotion, right? Not talking about it is the thing that kind of fucks you up. So acknowledging is the biggest thing. They don't define you. Oftentimes I answer this question too in that family meeting, or for myself when I look at sort of my list of things that are happening. What am I worried about the most? What are they worried about the most? Asking that question of your kids as they step into the season, a new school, a new routine that they've indicated that they're kind of worried about, or that you're worried about for them. What are you worried about the most? Sometimes we make lots of assumptions about what our kids are thinking or feeling, what our partner's thinking or feeling, and asking the question matters. I think about this all the time in leadership, because I make assumptions all the time what Marty's thinking, or Katie's thinking, or Des is thinking, or Jeff's thinking all the time. Asking the question, what are you worried about the most? What am I missing? What do you need from mom in this time? What do you need from dad in this time? And then what do we need from you? All of those things are really important questions as you step back in, because I think it just gives you some data that doesn't sort of keep that the lack of clarity sort of going. I think your honest answers in these situations then will help guide you into the places that, you know, you need to sort of dive into a bit more. The same question for your kids, even your staff, is so incredibly helpful to sort of gain insight and sort of help them navigate big feelings. Okay. Now, those few little tips are maybe, I hope, helpful, but also The last thing that I talk a lot about is reconnecting to your people, your breath, and your why as often as you can. So those are the three. That's the last section in Feeling Seen, the last book that I wrote that I really love to get back to. So knowing what to do when those overwhelming emotions come. We're not going to avoid these bitches this season. We're going to notice them, let them come in, and then always having sort of a plan to get back to the big three help me. When I'm feeling the shittiest and the most disconnected in my life, I had a major, I'd say like a mini meltdown, like a semi-major this week, Kmart. And what I found is one of my most grounding forces is to either have a conversation with Rhea in my head, who's one of my dearest friends who's no longer on this planet, or to call my mom. And I often worry about calling my mom because I think I panic her when I'm like, oh, the world is ending. I'm getting a divorce. I'm probably going to die. You know, all those things that tend to just come out of my mouth mostly when I'm in a state of just repair. And what is so critically important to me is having those honest conversations. Marty and I had a good chat about, I'm like, do you think I'm overreacting? And I like waited a very long time to ask that question because I don't think I'm fucking overreacting. I am very clear on why I'm spinning and why everybody else needs to spin right along with me. So I got brave and I said, do you think I'm overreacting? And you know what she said? Yes. Okay, well, you're fucking wrong, first of all, is what the answer to that question is. But here's the point about this process, right? Is that when you reconnect to the people who know you the best, your list of 5 or 4 who will honestly give you some input around what you need to be worried about and don't need to be worried about in this season is sort of critical. And we tend to spend some time in our heads internally focused, and we forget to lean into the people who matter the most. Going for a walk with a best friend, putting those big worries, thoughts, failures out into the universe to somebody, or even on paper that you know can trust, really is the outlet that we kind of need to be able to drop those shoulders. And then second, of course, that leads me into this place of your breath, of dropping those shoulders. And, you know, I'll take you through this again right now because I want you to remember how to do this in this moment. Deep breath. Drop your shoulders. Relax your jaw. Drop your tongue from the roof of your mouth. Very intentional, specific strategy, because we tend to carry a lot of our stress in our jaw, in our necks, and in our cores. So wiggle your toes. If you're driving and listening to this, don't, maybe just wiggle one at a time. Drop those shoulders. Smile. Your body responds very well when you, just even if you fake it, and let your gut out. Okay? Being able to get yourself in a relaxed body, and I've said this so many times over the last few weeks that I've talked, I want you to put a sticky note on your bathroom mirror or your computer that just says shoulders. Nobody else needs to know what it's about. And every time you see it, I want you to just think about where your body is. I want you to think about me when you go to sleep. I want you to think about me when you wake up. It's a bit creepy, I know, but here's what I want you to be thinking. Where's my shoulders? We have the most control over our own bodies, and sometimes that's the only thing we have control over. And we spend the vast majority of our energy worrying about other people or other situations or other things. And part of our job is to get really good at training ourselves to be back into this place of holding space for our own self. Okay. So that's really what this reconnection to your people, your breath really matters to me. Okay. And you cannot do it enough. I will never stop talking about this for the rest of our career. Every time you land back here, I will be giving you that reminder, because the hardest thing we will ever do is look into the eyes of the people we love. That will not change, but we will also never automate relationship. And the constant reminder of getting back into that place where we have access to the best parts of yourself will be the key to those who get the most out of this life. I believe that to the core. So, and then third thing is often, you know, just really that bigger picture, that why. What the fuck is all of this for? Why do you go to work? Why do you serve other people's children? Why are you a parent? Who do you want to be in this moment? None of us get out of here alive. Okay. And grounding yourself back into the bigger picture, the larger purpose, the reason, how you want to show up, what your legacy is, how you want to be remembered, sometimes just puts things into perspective. We only have control over such little things in these seasons. But what is so critical is not what happens to us is the problem. What we do with it really matters. Okay. So I've written all of these resources, these tips, these strategies out into, also, if you want to take a screenshot of this right now, I'm going to leave this up for a minute. But I have put all of these things into the resource section of today's workshop. And I've also put a couple of links in there to some books that I want you to consider, like The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, Think Like a Monk, some of those things that I know you might be familiar with. But Burnout is another really good book by the Nagoski sisters that I really, really loved. Not necessarily the end part of the book, but I really loved the first two parts of it. It's The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And it just comes up with so many good tips that it's not the end of the stressor. It's the stress response that we really have to be worried about. It's that body keeping the score. So I love how they describe it in that book. Also, I'm really excited about the 10% podcast. I found that to be super, super helpful to listen to a couple of their episodes. And so I put the link to them there. And there's also another thing I'm really interested in. I followed this week the human, what is it? Hang on. Human Garage. It's on a mission. Like, they often talk about the connection between the mind and the body, and I'm just finding it really interesting. So Human Garage, this is not a sponsor, and I'm fucking know the Human Garage, so if it's really shitty, just tell me. But I've just started following them, and I found some really interesting, helpful tips on that follow. So there's a few things that you can lean into if you want to know that we'll come right back here next month doing the personality disorder workshop, and that if you can take away some of these things, I hope they'll be really helpful for you. So now I want to use the next 28 minutes that we have together to take a look at some of the questions. So I know, Marty, have you had any good questions? Anybody wondering some stuff tonight that I need to be worried about? Okay, so there was a number of fantastic questions submitted before that I want to just go through real quick because I love these questions. Now, can an individual that has never shown or would have been described as an anxious person in their younger years develop anxiety in adulthood? Yes. So anxiety is an experience that, again, as we talked about tonight, indicates that there is a change, a response to something that the body feels that it can't handle, or that it's dangerous, or that it's, something that we need to be prepared for. And can you see Marty in the mirror now that it's, Marty, do you want to wave? You're reflecting in the window. There you go. Super duper. I just noticed that. So when you if you've never been anxious, can this happen in adulthood? Yes. When we hit various hormonal changes in our body, or life changes in our body, menopause can bring this on, as a change in a job, an experience with a system. Now, if we're predisposed to anxiety, there's all these kind of questions when, I'd ever do an assessment from a clinical perspective. What's your genetic history? What happens in your life? What is your story of this particular season? Sometimes when we step into parenthood, it's the first time that we've experienced anxiety, postpartum anxiety or depression. It's the first time. I've never been an anxious person until I had kids. All of these different seasons can sort of evoke either an experience or a response to the world that makes us anxious, or just really puts us over that sort of threshold that now makes us realize that it's there. And so many, many things can bring that up. So the question again then responds to sort of, why is it there? Not what's wrong with us, but what happened to us in this season that would allow my body to sort of kick that into action. So that reflection, that conversation with somebody who knows you well, or a therapist where you can unpack some of that stuff, that's the beauty, right? Is that we weren't meant to do many of these things alone. And sometimes when we're in the weeds of our own lives, sometimes putting it out into the universe or having a conversation with somebody else really allows us to be clear about why in this particular season, this particular moment, whatever that is, can kind of make sense of that, which then allows us to integrate that experience so much better. And it doesn't continue to kick us in the ass. It's a fundamental basis of PTSD. Okay. Another question. I have been told that some of the behaviors and symptoms related to anxiety can look like or manifest similar to ADHD, particularly in what refers to task completion, efficiency, and concentration. Is this true? Yes. So when we think about ADHD, and we did a whole workshop on this last month, what I love a lot about the way that dopamine works in our brains is that the ability to slow down and focus and attend to things is a very important skill in this life, particularly the more inundated we become with information, okay? And when you are anxious, worried, lid is flipping about things, it can perpetuate symptoms that make it difficult to complete tasks, to be efficient in things, and to just basically concentrate. So there's sometimes some overlap. So if you have a legitimate diagnosis of ADHD, which, as I talked about in the last resource or in the last workshop, a very specific and dedicated assessment, if you were considering whether you have ADHD, is very important, because trauma, significant emotional dysregulation can mimic the symptoms of both anxiety and ADHD. And so the context is so much more critical than the symptoms when I'm trying to make a really clear clinical judgment on what's happening with your symptom presentation. And it is so much about not what is the behavior, what is wrong with you in this moment, but what happened to you. What is your story? What does the genogram look like? What is the genetic history? And then what is your experiences, okay? So do some of those symptoms overlap? Sometimes the answer is yes. What are some strategies one can use to overcome anxiety? So I gave you a list of some of the things that I hope will be helpful in this season of really sort of attending to these things. But so much of the behavioral interventions that we tend to do with kids or adults with anxiety tend to be dedicated specifically to getting the body back to a state of emotional regulation. And for some people, this, certain strategies will work better than others. But if I think about some of the distraction strategies, and there's lots of debate in the literature whether you should distract as a helpful symptom of anxiety. But I'll tell you the difference between using a specific strategy to distract in the moment versus using distraction as a full strategy to just avoid anxiety or thinking about things. That's not what we want to do. Specifically around getting the body back to a state of calm, often can be little things like tapping your fingers on the desk, being able to go through something that we call a calm strategy. Marty loves this as a strategy when she's super anxious. And I've done this with Asher many, many times. Use calm, CALM, when you are losing your mind, and come up with a category of things that you have to go through and identify the letters of calm with that particular category. So think about animals, for example, and give me an animal that starts with the C, give me an animal that starts with an A, give me an animal that starts with an L, and give me an animal that starts with an M. Go through that a number of times, CLAM, until you notice that your body calms. If you run out of animals, or animals piss you off, or you're not a fan of animals, use chocolate bars, or hockey teams, or colors, or furniture. The point is, I want you to get out of your head and back into your body. When we think about deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, any of those things, those strategies are intended to be able to get you back into a state of functioning. It does not address specifically why you're there, which is why sometimes I think significantly just strictly behavioral strategies without knowing the context in which emotion is occurring is a problem. But they are useful in sort of getting you back in the moment, because oftentimes it is, most often when anxiety is becoming debilitating and there is no imminent danger, our job is to sort of get back to our body to remind it that it's not in danger, that we are in control over the situation, that our thoughts can feel real, but how do we sort of question them, and take away some of their power? Understanding that anxiety is an external force sometimes can be helpful, particularly with kids, when we're going to externalize the anxiety and together we're going to fight it. Okay, it's not going to push us around at bedtime. We got this. Asher called he was allowed to have 1 square a day back in the day, and so it was the worry bitch that we would address in the evenings. But you can call it anything you want, like the monster, the bad guy, or you can befriend it, right? The worry guy that's trying to keep me safe, poking their head around. We got to remind them that I am safe in this moment, right? And externalizing that can sometimes be helpful as well. ADHD is something that comes with an individual since birth. Legitimate ADHD, that is true. What about anxiety? Yes. Can you have genetic components that are present in anxiety? Yes, because it's a clinical disorder, which often is related to, just like ADHD, the specificity of some specific neurotransmitters are involved in the experience of anxiety, depression, ADHD. And if you have more or less of those things, it can dictate the way that you can handle things in this world. Anxiety, non-clinical anxiety, however, as we talked about today, is a thing that everybody has. Everybody has. They experience stress, they experience anxiety to some degree. When it becomes debilitating or clinical, I'd like to sort of know the genetic history there, because some of us will be more predisposed to it than others, just like ADHD. Okay. Now, I love this question. Lately, I have been trying to give myself grace and encouraging self-talk, therefore validating myself. But I worry that I still depend too much on validation of others, maybe my husband. Any advice? Okay. We were never meant to do any of this alone, okay? So being able to have people, villages in your world that you can lean on is actually really sacred and important. Part of the most important thing, I think particularly as we get older, is being very clear on what you want, who you are, as you develop and change. That's going to be very different than it was last year, certainly different than it was 3 years ago, a lifetime, I mean, before you had kids, before you got a job, whatever those things are. And I think sometimes it's really helpful, particularly in this season, as you know, we sort of talked about doing a bit of a reflection. This time of change, or this season of change, is sometimes a really good time to do that. Is what's important to me right now? What's important to me in this season? Is the focus, am I aligned in what my job needs, what my family needs, and what I need in this system, in this chapter, I'm sorry. And I think sometimes it's a really good time to reflect on that. And knowing that people use these terms all the time. I'm a people pleaser. I spend a lot of time avoiding confrontation. I really want to make other people happy. That is such a common experience. Okay. And I don't want it to become the narrative that then debilitates you, because I hear this so many times from people. I am really a people pleaser. I'm so dependent on keeping other people happy that I forego myself. Okay. So if you know that about yourself, stop fucking doing it. All right. Acknowledgement is the first step. And people say it's easier said than done. Okay. Actually, it's not, because the more aware you are of it, the more I want you just to notice it. The more I want you just to wonder about, how do you really feel when you're asking your husband for his opinion, or your partners for their opinion? Because oftentimes what happens in that moment is when we are in a state of dysregulation, we lose access to what we know to be true about ourselves. I always want you to be connected to your village and the people who matter the most to you. And you will be at your best. You're typically your most confident and your most competent when you do the things that get you regulated back into your sense. So when I am in a state of really wondering what other people think of me, oh my God, Marty, is this a bad idea? What do you think about this? I'm constantly questioning, holy shit, everybody hates me. Now people are questioning my character. That is typically time for me to go, okay, what do I know to be true in this situation? What do I need in this situation? And sometimes it is a conversation with the people who I love the most, and a reflection on, am I overreacting? Am I being a bitch? What do I need to know? And when we ask those questions and can get those honest answers, the fact that you could ask those questions tells me that you're going to do a drop of your shoulders first, and then seek those answers to those questions honestly. It can change everything. Okay? Hope that helps. How do I explain my anxiety to my family so they understand instead of just telling me I have issues? That is so fantastic. Okay. I find that sometimes it's not anybody else's responsibility to sort of navigate the way that we show up in the world. I oftentimes find this very simple strategy of the lid flip to be very clear, in that sometimes when I get overwhelmed, I lose access to the best parts of myself. My lid flips. And I'm going to tell you, in this season, when things are going 0 to 60, I'm going to do my very best to keep my lid on. But I know myself well enough to be able to know that I might not always do that. Okay. And when we start to talk about that acknowledgement as a system, who you sort of navigate the world with the most, having them know that about you, having those conversations about not debilitating the fact that you have issues, but that you're pretty normal. They have issues too. Everybody got the issues. But it is how we sort of handle it together as a group and as a community, because I want to be better this time than I was last year. I want to handle this a bit better. I want us to know how we navigate this together a bit more, is sometimes helpful for them and you. Okay, good. How do you help your child navigate? Okay, so there's been a number of questions in here about changing friendships, the anticipatory anxiety of stepping back into the season if your kid is going into, for example, this is their first year of kindergarten, or they're transitioning to middle school or high school or whatever that is. My number one suggestion in this situation is to not avoid it. Right? You have to name it to tame it. So if your kid's the bullier, or they're going to step back into a class, they've been put into a class where there is, that they've had historically problems with this kid in the past, they're not going to like their teacher, whatever the deal is. Talk about it, right? What are you worried about the most? What can I do to help? What are some things we can think about that might help us navigate this? I don't know. I don't got any ideas. You're pretty smart. Like, if we had to tell anybody else how to handle the situation, like, what are some things that we might say? I don't know. This is stupid. Okay. Well, I gotta tell you, you know what else is stupid is that, like, I feel stupid sometimes because I've never been a mom or a dad of a situation where I'm trying to walk a 13-year-old through this stuff. So I'm wondering if we can figure this out together. Okay, I got some ideas and they're probably going to be dumb, but like, let's throw them on the table. Okay, how about whatever this is, right? How about we check in every Monday? How about we check in every day after school? If I'm not in the house for text messaging, and you're not going to get pissed off because I'm going to check in and say, how was the day? Can we agree to that? No, I only want it every second day. Cool. Every second day it is. Let's do that. What is, I think, what are we scared about stepping back in? I remember particularly when Asher, maybe this was the twins, I can't remember, stepping into a class and really worried about not fitting in, doing all those things. And I had the most amazing teacher. It was Asher. And she was awesome. I reached out, sent an email and said, I'm really worried about this transition. And I feel like an idiot sort of asking you this, because I know you have so many things on your plate. But I'm a little bit worried about how this transition is going to go. Is there anything I can do to help as my kid ends up in your class? And she is still his favorite teacher to this day. She said, you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to just meet you guys out, and like, would you have like 20 minutes, even if we can just meet before even school starts? And I was like, yeah. Mrs. Morgan is probably the most remarkable human in the history of teaching, and I've met many of them. They talked about their love of Harry Potter. They talked about what's going to happen in this season. And to this day, he talks about her all the time. It's also true of a teacher that my kids had, Mr. Seeley. They've been out of grade 3 for some time now. And we talk about the time that it took, first of all, where making a plan for what that was going to look like, and the ability that we had to sort of communicate and say, like, hang on, Liv's coming in hot. And Mr. Seeley's ability to say to me, I got it. It's okay. No problem. Right? And I'm like, okay, thank you so much. And then I would send lots of snacks and treats and wine. And sometimes it's really about building this community that matters. And when our education staff, our hockey coaches, our people who are in our village, grandparents, aunties, cookums, the people who are, sort of helpful, we try to do this all as parents oftentimes. And you're not that good. And typically, here's the problem. Your kids don't listen to you as well as they will listen to your best friend or their teacher or Marty. And we feel really incompetent. I remember talking about this all the time. We went on with Tara, is one of our good friends, and our kids love Tara. And she's the best mom. And oftentimes in big moments, they're always like, why can't you be more like Tara? Tara's the best mom ever. I want to go live with Tara. Okay, fine, you go live with Tara. And I feel really, listen to me. I wrote a best-selling book on how to parent, okay? How to be a teacher. And I say this all the time. If you see me with my personal children, you wouldn't buy the fucking book, because I question my abilities all the time. And I will tell you, I wrote that when I was regulated. You know this stuff when you're regulated. And when we're dysregulated, often what we need is the people around us who can build that village, who can step in and have those hard conversations. I'm worried about so-and-so. I think he's kind of, watching some things on the internet that he shouldn't be. Would you check on him for me? The favorite uncle, the favorite best friend, whatever that is. Don't hesitate to pull that village in. Okay. Okay, we got time for just a couple more questions. I love these. These are great. I hope this is helpful. How do you not pass on your anxieties to your kids? Okay, number one, you will. Our children are very much a product of who we are. And let's normalize some of that. I often say this all the time. Like, I say to our kids, okay, so when you're in therapy, talking about me, here's what I want you to remember, okay? There were good times. I'm trying, okay? Because I think so much of this is, we are certainly a barometer of how our kids show up in the world. And I want to take that pressure away, because in addition to the fact that, we often spend a lot of times about how much, thinking about how much we're fucking them up. I just really want to remind you how awesome you are, how much of the time your kids adore you. And this cannot be measured on how they respond to you. Okay. Because we often put a lot of clout into this idea that, like, they say they hate me, they don't like me, they don't want to spend time with me. I have spent a lot of time with kids who have been in very difficult situations with parents doing the best they can with what they got. We are neurobiologically wired for connection. And sometimes the people that we push away the most, the people that we get in the most disagreements with, it's necessary, particularly in times of adolescence and 0 to 2. I hate you, I'm me, all those things. That is the time where the regulating other becomes the most important. How we honestly and carefully show our own emotions, how we not protect our kids when things get tough between us, how we have those hard conversations, how we repair, but how we also understand that in this moment, what they need is a regulating other to navigate them through big emotions. The chaos is necessary to learn to calm. So you being an anxious person is 100% okay. You talking about that when it's time and appropriate, developmentally appropriate with your kids is 100% okay. And being able to be honest with our children about, we always don't know what to do. We didn't come with a script. We're trying to parent the way we were parented, and that was in a completely different time. And sometimes we're not going to get it right. So let's talk about how I do this better, is sometimes some of the most important conversations I've ever had with my kids. So, and that I've ever had, I think, in therapy with some of the kids that I've been lucky enough to work with. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Give it to me. Sure. Read them to the people.
How do we reset our perspective and enjoy August, not letting it feel like sudden?
Okay. I don't know if you heard that, but how do we reset our take on August and not let it feel like the Sunday of summer? Okay. Number one, we need to do this on purpose. All right. Because anticipatory anxiety steals with us all the what ifs, take away what is the goodness that's happening. I want you to think about in the last little bit of summer, grounding into your moments every day at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. Okay. You will have places and times to worry about what's going to happen down the road. Making the list of what is on your plate coming up is very helpful because you can then put it aside and know when you're going to deal with those things. When you don't put it down in one place, sometimes it feels like there's a lot of little things sprinkled and you're just like, okay, yep, I'm not thinking about it. It's August. I'm good. Nope, good. Put it down in one place and leave it there. Okay. No, that's number one. Number two, that grounding place of in the morning and at night, be very aware of your surroundings and your days, right? Be very aware that I have this moment today to sink into my kids, to sink into reading another book, to taking a nap. Give yourself full permission to do those things on purpose. And the fact that you're asking that question in and of itself is amazing because it tells me that you want to be very conscious about not letting these days slip by. And that's all you can do. Good.
I get really confident during the day as well. But for some reason, I wake up at 3 a.m. most nights and I call them nighttime negatives. Do you have any nighttime suggestions for resolution isn't working?
Ooh. Okay, so the nighttime negatives. I don't know if you could hear that from there, but like I do a pretty good job navigating things during the day, but at night I wake up at 3 a.m. Okay. Do you have any response to that?
Well, I sleep pretty good.
Yeah,
so
well,
I kind of know.
Sometimes you
Yeah.
do. But I think, okay, so the nighttime waking up at 3 a.m. is so common. And here's our biggest mistake that happens at the 3 a.m. wake ups. We panic when we're up at 3 a.m. because we're like, son of a bitch, now we're not going to get back to sleep. God damn it. And then you think about things and you do. Okay. The body keeps the score. One of the mistakes that I make sometimes, but I sometimes find it necessary, is if I can't shut my brain off, I have to distract. Okay. Now, this is not a very good suggestion. Don't write this down necessarily. Just remember it, is that sometimes I need to sink into somebody else's life for even 15 minutes so that I can shut my brain off again. I either pick up my book and read it, or I will jump into a show that I'm in. Now, be very careful with that because if you are into crime dramas where people are killing each other, it will not regulate your system. If you are into something that can slow your system down, consider that. A book is a much better choice than the blue light of a screen. That's sort of like the worst case scenario, okay? The 3 a.m., I want you to do a couple of things. Either get up and reset, so pee, get a drink of water, get a cup of milk, lay back down, and get your body back in a state of calm. Remind it that it's safe, that you will handle all of the things that you will need to. If there is an intrusive thought that continues to come in, like don't forget about that email, don't forget about that email. You need to make sure you do have a piece of paper, particularly in a season, like if you're planning a wedding or you're going back to work or you're doing all those things, have a notebook so that you can write that stuff down, leave it there, and you will worry about it in the morning. Right? If it's an ongoing thing, like, my baby is sick or an impending diagnosis or things like that, that you can't then, just put down. The biggest intervention in those moments is to then calm your body. Do a progressive muscle relaxation, start at your toes, go all the way up to the tip of your head. and then do that for the rest of the day, the rest of the night. Even if you don't fall back to sleep, if you can get yourself back into that state of really on purpose relaxing your body, you will be restoring it to some degree, not to the same degree as if you actually fall asleep. But what happens is we stay stuck in our head. So the biggest strategy is just to switch to your body as best as you can, okay? Just drop your shoulders, relax your head in that progressive play. Start at your toes, tense them, release. Start at your heels, tense, release. Your calves, your knees, work all the way up to every part of your body. When you get to the top of your head, do it again. Go all the way back down. And do that as often as you can until you start to sink into the comfort of and the safety of being back in your own body. Cool. Okay, good. Anything else? Quick. Last question. Okay, gently approaching the anticipatory anxiety we see in them. You have to name it to tame it. It's not if you're going to have hard conversations, it's when. Not in the heat of the moment when they're panicking, like Marty was very good at doing. When I was like, holy fuck, we need to do this, we need to do that, and this is going to fail. We need to hire somebody here. We need to do these 6 things. Do we even have a strategy? Do we even have a, she said like this, okay. Mm-hmm. Valid thoughts, okay. I'm going to take some notes, okay. And then the next day, when I was in a calmer state and we had a snack, do you think I'm overreacting? Yes, he said. It is not if you're going to have the conversation, it's when, okay? And it's how. Snacks, dropping the shoulders, leaning with, here's all the things that I think we're going to be able to handle in this situation. I know this time comes with heavy stuff. It does all the time. And here's what I want to make sure that we don't miss in this season. I notice that the ramping up is happening. I saw this yesterday. Are you noticing that too? How you do it is so important, but don't shy away from it, because sometimes it is that external insight that we all need. Okay, my friends. Desi, did you get that back? You got it back. Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us. I know our time is up for tonight. Always such an honor. Thank you for stepping in with me. And I really want this to be a safe place where we can talk about hard things. Any feedback that you have, you'll get an email about it. Send us all your feedback, anything that you'd like to see or be better. I always love to hear it. Also, the replay, I just, as a note, you'll get an email when the replay is ready. But always on this site that you're landing on now, you can always click that button in the next 7 days, even if you didn't jump in to watch it now or you didn't get the whole thing. That's where you will be able to have access to the replay. Okay. No, we can't extend the replay past 7 days. We will always get questions about that. I'm so sorry. The platform doesn't allow us to do that. So it's the 7 days. Do your very best to get it in there. And I think ticket sales are still open. If you think this will be helpful to somebody, we close it tonight. Always at the end of the day. I think that's the last day. So at midnight, I think that's the last time you can access it. And we can't then give you access after that as soon as that's closed. I wish we could, but we can't. So thank you for joining us. Next one is up on personality disorders. If you have any questions about it, send me all of those before, and tickets are open for that one now. So get that if you think that would be something that you would love to talk about. And in the meantime, take care of each other. Thank you for being here. I think you're amazing. Drop your shoulders. And my wish for you and for me is that this is the best season yet, because I think it can be. Have a good night, everybody.